But there was another piece which goes back to this open source paradigm shift idea, which was that the IBM PC commoditized hardware, and everybody, and this is what I watched happening in my own career, everybody was familiar with the world in which hardware was the source of value. And in the early days of the PC revolution, people tried to differentiate themselves by, oh, we have a faster bus, we have different, hardware features, because that was the world they were used to. Meanwhile, the company that really made out like bandit was Microsoft, because they realized that the new lock-in was software, which had been undervalued in the previous era. Now, Clay Christensen, the Harvard Business School professor who wrote The Innovator's Dilemma and many other books, about the time I was sort of crystallizing this idea, had this wonderful paper where he talked about the law of conservation of attractive profits. When something becomes a commodity, something else becomes valuable. So hardware became a commodity, the margins went out of hardware, software became really valuable. And I was thinking about, but wait, open source software and the open protocols of the internet are commoditizing software. So what's becoming valuable?
What is becoming valuable?
And I came to the conclusion that it was large databases, often generated by user contribution over the net. And that was what I meant by Web 2.0.
What was consumer-generated content making some huge corpus that didn't exist
before?
Well,
and so the way we told the Web 2.0 story originally was around this idea of why did some companies survive the dot-com bust? They got their value from user contribution. So if you look at eBay, even though it was a Web 1.0 success, it was one of the ones that survived because it collected value from its users. It had network effects in the data that was produced. Craigslist, network effects in the data. Google, less obvious, but
certainly they're indexing the web.
Yeah, they're indexing the web, and more than that, they were really smart about extracting meaning from what people did with the data. What did they click on? What AdSense, literally, AdWords, literally being able to predict what people would click on. All this user contribution. Amazon, way more in the way of nurturing reviews, showing you the products that people were most interested in, not the one that some vendor wanted to shove down your throat. So the people who got user contribution loans, and of course, since then, people have started generating more and more data. And so, given the name, everybody always said to me, well, they thought Web 2.0 was a version number, which it wasn't. They said, well, what's Web 3? And I would always say, well, it's not a version number. But if there was a Web 3, it would come when the data was generated not by people typing on keyboards, but by sensors. And I wrote a paper several years ago called Web Squared, where I talked about that idea. But sure enough, if you look at what's happening today with your smartphones, sensor-driven applications are what is driving collective intelligence. And of course, that was, I guess, my bumper sticker for Web 2.0 was harnessing collective intelligence.